This is not a podcast episode about politics. It is an essay about reality. And the reality in Israel is, unfortunately, far different than many of us are hoping for. In the immediate aftermath of October 7th, and still to this day, many of us want what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been calling total victory over Hamas. It would be weird to not want this for Israel and Israelis, unless you have a fetish for anti-Semitic terrorist organizations. But life is not black and white, geopolitics even less, and the international community a clusterfuck of mostly hypocritical, corrupted professional liars. Some call that a cynical view of the world. I call it the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Israel cannot win this war in the so-called happy ending sense, because Israel has not been allowed to win wars for quite some time now, and Israel's enemies know this. It does not matter that Israel has one of the world's top 5 strongest armies and nuclear weapons, because the wars that Israel has fought against Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah are not merely military conflicts. These wars transcend the literal battlefields and include a convoluted combination of economics and geopolitics, as well as domestic politics in countries like the US and United Kingdom, and even those such as Saudi Arabia and South Africa. People keep comparing Israel to the World War II-era Allied forces, and Hamas to the Nazis. But the world is far different now than it was during and immediately after the Second World War. Globalization and multinational capitalism, among other heightened trends, are far more consequential than the good guys versus the bad guys, and right versus wrong. Populism, while nothing new, also plays a part in Israel's wars. And I am not just talking about in Israel or in Gaza. Politicians across the world, namely Joe Biden and his Democrats, have leveraged this war for their own domestic socio-political agendas. In America, Biden's Democrats spent the first few days after October 7th coveting Israel, really Jewish American voters and political donors, before quickly moving to a blatantly anti-Israel communication strategy that has made Jews in America less safe and Israel unjustifiably isolated. Why? Because the Democrats are effectively becoming America's party for people of color, and Palestinians are people of color, whereas Israelis are white in the eyes of many Democrats. Anyone with an actual working brain knows how ridiculous it is to judge people by the color of their skin, no less that most Israelis are not even white. But that is besides the point. The more pressing issue is, Israel will not be allowed to win this war, again, which is partly Israel's fault for giving the United States so much leverage over it, and for not realizing how wars are won these days, not just with a formidable military, but with international leverage. Make no mistake, I am all for Israel going after Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah wherever they hide in the world. But it does not matter what I and you and others want. What matters is who has what leverage and how they are applying it. Right now, Qatar and Iran have far more leverage than Israel, vis-a-vis the West, and they are playing it incredibly well. Israel not so much. Thus, the right thing for Israel to do is to agree to end this war in exchange for the release of every single hostage, immediately. I guess we can call it a consolation prize. This means swift and complete withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza and no drip-drop hostage release like we saw in November, all at once for all parties involved. Then, we need elections. Again, this is not a political statement. The majority of people in Israel from the left, right, and center do not trust the current government. And why should we? The intelligence and military failure of October 7th was unprecedented in Israeli history, and everyone in power currently should be held responsible, not to be confused with blame, for responsibility and blame are two different things. I am a right-wing voter in Israel, primarily for security reasons, but I also believe in democracy, so whoever wins this new election I will support, including Netanyahu. I will not vote for Netanyahu, but I can live with the results of democracy, for it is the best way, even if you do not love the results every time. Once we have a new elected government, Israel should create a 3 to 10-year strategy whereby we go into full Cold War mode against Iran, Qatar, and their proxies. No individual and no country is off limits, including those we have peace with, for example, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, and the United Arab Emirates. Indeed, since World War II, Israel has probably assassinated more people than any other country in the West, according to Israeli journalist Ronen Bergman, who authored a book on the topic. If you are wondering about Israel pursuing assassinations and destroying terrorist infrastructure in countries that are friendly to the Jewish state, you can trust the Mossad to get creative, for they always have. Poisoned toothpaste that takes a month to end its target's life, armed drones, exploding mobile phones, spare tires with remote-controlled bombs, assassinating enemy scientists, and discovering the secret lovers of Muslim clerics have been among the methods used by the Israeli security establishment. And still, this is only part of Israel's strategic 3 to 10-year plan. Another aspect includes ending the corrupted and monopolistic relationship that the U.S. forged with Israel, most recently in a 10-year military aid agreement that then-President Barack Obama signed in 2016 and went into effect 2 years later. After the agreement expires circa 2028, it must not be renewed under any circumstances, for it has proven to be a disastrous point of American leverage against Israel, and it has significantly downgraded Israeli military technology, manufacturing, and the amount of local jobs in the sector. There is a saying in Hebrew, Hazol ole behyoker, meaning, something cheap costs a lot of money. In this context, the $3 billion in annual military aid that Israel receives from the U.S. is not a gift. It is golden handcuffs, the effects of which we have seen on full display since October 7th. I am by no means a military expert, but it seems to me that Israel must develop military independence if the Jewish state and the Jewish people are truly to control our fate. It also seems to me that, after this independence is achieved, at least to a certain extent, far greater than what it is today, more countries will respect Israel and give it more leeway in future wars. Like the Arabs, with their natural resources and 1/6 of the world's wealth, Israel has a lot to offer to the international community. Achieving true independence will allow the Jewish state to develop more leverage and provide more support to different countries that have different needs at different points in time. There is also much to build on with the Abraham Accords. There are several other countries in the Middle East and North Africa that share Israel's interests in defanging Iran, Qatar, the Muslim Brotherhood, and their proxies' influence in the region. I have no doubt that the Saudis, Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Moroccans, the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, and others will be happy to continue working with Israel, covertly, of course, to ensure the Middle East does not become an Islamist playground. Israel has the brains and creativity, these other countries the funds, and together that can make for a splendid combination. As for now, we have to accept that Israel has lost this battle, but not the greater war, for it will still rage in the background, regardless of how this current Israel-Hamas saga ends. The more we remain in denial of this reality, the more we risk greater harm to the Jewish state and the Jewish people. The faster we accept this reality, the faster we can use our individual powers, such as our vote, to elect politicians who are geared toward different aspects of the strategies and tactics I detailed in this podcast episode, and of course others. There is still hope, plenty of it, but it starts with being honest and accepting reality for what it is, not as we wish it to be.